In today's world, the headlines are often filled with stories that make the heart heavy: violence, theft, selfishness, and cruelty. Before we continue, please take some time to subscribe to Dailydose, like, and share this video. But every once in a while, a story comes along that feels different. A story that reminds us that kindness still exists, that people are capable of extraordinary selflessness, even when the act of giving comes with great risk. This is one of those stories. For Nancy Bloor, a 54-year-old kindergarten teacher in Iowa, her students were more than names on a class list. She loved her work, and she loved the children who filled her classroom with laughter, questions, and tiny voices learning how to navigate the world. She had taught for many years, and she always tried to give her best. But with one student, a boy named Camden, she would end up giving more than anyone ever expected. Camden was 4 years old, a bright-eyed child who usually ran into school with joy. He laughed easily, played with friends, and seemed to carry sunshine in his smile. But one day, Nancy noticed something different. His energy was gone. His laughter was quieter, his face more serious. At first, she thought perhaps he hadn't slept well, or maybe wasn't feeling his best. But when the change lingered the next day, she felt concerned. Teachers, after all, notice things parents sometimes miss. So Nancy took the time to sit with him. She asked gently if something was wrong, and in the way children often do, Camden answered with more honesty than anyone could have predicted. His words stunned her. "My daddy is very sick," he said softly. "He might die." The simplicity of the statement pierced Nancy's heart. She knew children sometimes exaggerate, mixing imagination with reality. But this felt different. His small voice carried a weight no child should bear. She decided to call his father, not only to check, but to reassure Camden that someone cared enough to listen. When she reached Camden's father, 34-year-old Daryl Peterson, the truth became clear. Camden hadn't been exaggerating at all. His father was gravely ill. Daryl explained that his kidneys were failing, working at only 20% of their normal capacity. He was on dialysis, a grueling treatment that left him weak, nauseated, and exhausted. For a child like Camden, watching his father suffer day after day was terrifying. Nancy felt her heart ache for them both. She thought about how helpless Camden must have felt, how heavy those small shoulders must have carried the fear. Most teachers, in that moment, might have offered babysitting, or meals, or even a fundraiser. But Nancy's heart was already moving in a different direction. She couldn't shake the thought, what if she could do something more? In conversations with the family, she learned what Daryl truly needed: a kidney. Without a transplant, his life expectancy was shrinking quickly. There were people waiting, as there always are, but the waiting list was long, and time was not his friend. Nancy's decision came as naturally to her as breathing. She didn't hesitate. She offered what most would never dream of offering: one of her own kidneys. The family was stunned. Daryl could barely process the idea. How could a teacher, someone outside their circle of family and close friends, make such an enormous offer? Yet Nancy insisted she was serious. For her, it wasn't about being a hero. It was about helping a child she loved by saving the person he loved most. Tests were arranged, blood work done, compatibility checked. When the results came back, Nancy received the news. She was a perfect match. She remembers smiling at the thought. All that stood between her and giving Daryl a new chance at life was paperwork, procedure, and time. Her joy in learning she could help was overwhelming. She told reporters later that she felt it was one of the happiest discoveries of her life. While many in her position might have hesitated, weighed the risks, or reconsidered, Nancy didn't falter. She said that just knowing she could help Camden and his father was all the motivation she needed. Meanwhile, Daryl tried to put into words what the act meant to him. He said it was almost beyond belief. "It's just amazing," he explained in an interview. "There are people waiting every day for a kidney, for an organ. What Nancy is doing gives me a second chance at life. I wish there were more people like her." Nancy's story began to spread beyond their small community. What started as a quiet act of generosity soon became news that touched thousands. But for Nancy, it was never about attention. It was about Camden, about a little boy who needed hope. Still, people wondered about her choice. After all, donating a kidney isn't a small thing. What if one day her remaining kidney began to fail? Would she regret it then? Nancy's answer was simple, and it silenced her critics. She said that if something ever happened to her, she believed someone else would step forward for her, just as she had stepped forward for Daryl. In a world often darkened by selfishness, Nancy's words shone with rare light. The weeks that followed felt like a blur. Nancy went through the final steps of preparation, the endless forms, the medical clearances, and the quiet moments of reflection. She thought often about her students, about Camden, and about how life sometimes places us in moments we could never have predicted. She wasn't afraid. If anything, she was excited that she had the chance to give back something so important. For Daryl, each day before the surgery felt heavier. Dialysis was draining him, both physically and emotionally. He admitted later that he had almost given up hope, that the waiting list felt endless, and that the possibility of seeing his son grow up seemed to slip further away with each treatment. But Nancy's decision had changed that. It had given him something that medicine alone could not: hope. The surgery day arrived quietly, without grand speeches or cameras, just doctors, nurses, and two people connected by a decision that would change both their lives. The operation was long but successful. When Daryl awoke, weak but alive, he realized that the gift inside him was not just a kidney, it was the selflessness of a woman who believed in kindness. News of what Nancy had done spread like wildfire. A simple Facebook post about her donation was shared more than 300,000 times. Comments poured in from strangers across the country and even the world. Some wrote that they cried reading the story. Others said Nancy had restored their faith in humanity. For many, her act of generosity was proof that goodness still existed, even in a world where darkness often steals the headline. Camden, too young to understand all the details, knew enough to feel safe again. He saw his father smile more, stand taller, and laugh in ways he hadn't in months. For a child, that was everything. And when he returned to school, his joy returned too. His little voice filled the classroom with laughter again, and Nancy felt a quiet peace knowing she had helped make that possible. When people asked her why she did it, her answer never changed. She said she didn't see herself as a hero. She saw herself as a teacher, as someone who cared for her students, and when one of them needed help, she gave it. She believed the world worked best when people looked out for one another, even if it meant giving something as precious as a part of yourself. For Daryl, the gift meant life. For Camden, it meant a father's presence. And for Nancy, it meant knowing that in the quiet corners of ordinary life, extraordinary things can still happen. And so, what began as a little boy's worried confession to his teacher became a story of second chances, of faith, and of kindness, too rare to ignore. It became a reminder, especially for those who listen before falling asleep, that the world still holds mystery, goodness, and hope. Because sometimes the most powerful lessons don't come from a classroom. They come from the heart.